Hello, 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 everyone. Happy Saturday. I'm Claire Jones, and I'm a queer fantasy romance author, as well as a publisher that supports other writers in getting their works shared with the world. And we are jumping on for my Marketing as Authors Facebook Live series, where I interview the amazing and aspiring authors in my network to discuss the marketing strategies that have propelled our writing careers forward in meaningful ways. If you're joining us, please like, comment, share below. Let us know that you're here. And today I'm talking to Sierra.
Hello. Also, there's a dog. I see a dog back.
Yes, yes. I have to point to the right side. There we go.
We'll have to have the dog answer some marketing questions too.
Yes, sometimes her tail will just like go back and forth in the
Oh,
bottom of my screen, and I'm like, all right, she can be our second guest.
I love it. I love it. And now to dog in the streets. She's like a
Yes,
reporter on the ground.
I've been meaning to actually get one of those little microphones and do those little pet interviews that they have
Yes,
online. Those are precious.
those they're amazing.
Have you seen the vets where they're like, how do you feel about your visit at the vet today?
Oh my gosh, no, that's amazing.
A plus internet content.
That's what the internet is for, really, I think. At the end of the day, we just
Absolutely.
want to see like funny dogs and cats.
Absolutely. Well, welcome. So glad to have you here. So, first, give us a rundown of your books. What are they? How many have there been so far? And what do you have planned for the future?
Yeah, I'm Sierra Simone. I write um erotic, queer, kinky romance that ranges from contemporary to taboo to historical to a little bit of paranormal. And rom-com now, which is like a new foray for me in the last couple of years. I'm not really known for my cheerfulness
Yeah,
in
I was
my
about to say
writing.
that is a bit of a departure.
And I am currently in the middle of a queer, kinky, and contemporary retelling of Mark Tristan and Isolde, that old chestnut. I'm happy to say that after 1,500 years, the story is now fixed. You're welcome. And I have
Yes.
fixed it with the two universal solutions, which are bisexuality and spanking. Um,
Yes. I mean, if that's not the
fixes everything.
solution to everything, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's a universal screwdriver. So I the second book in that trilogy comes out this June. The first book, Salt Kiss, came out last fall. And then the third book will come out early next year. And yeah, so that's kind of what's on the horizon. And then on the rom-com side, I write I write these like small town Christmas rom-coms with my best friend Julie Murphy. And
Rom-com. I haven't
I
heard that term before, and I
I
love it.
I like to say that it's like if a Hallmark movie had lube is kind of the is kind of the vibe. The first book opens with someone just packing a suitcase full of dildos. So, we really we
You got
really
to be
jump right
prepared.
in. And so the last book in that series is coming out this fall. So we are currently in the final pass pages stage of that. So it's kind of funny that you invited me on to talk about marketing as an author because I actually have done everything that you're not supposed to do. If listen to like a marketing podcast, if you take a
Sure.
class, if you read a book, they're going to tell you, write like seven of the same kind of book
Oh,
that
yeah.
yeah, that look like they belong together on the shelf, release them at regular intervals, stay in a subgenre for a while. If you branch out, think about doing a pin name instead of having it all
Mm,
under one umbrella.
yeah.
And my method is just literally to write what I want, and then I write too slowly, and I don't have enough bandwidth to just juggle 1,000 pen names. So I'm like, well, it's all Sierra, baby.
I mean, there is such a thing as a multi-passionate brand.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I mean, I really think that the goal I think of any author should be to be here in 10 years. It should
Mm.
not be to be on the New York Times bestseller list. It should not be to be in
Oh,
Target. Like those are things that are wholly outside of your control. And so
yeah.
that's why you see babies, like 23-year-old babies, hit the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah.
Um, or, you see books that you've never even heard of get picked up by Target. It's completely outside of your control. But what
Mm,
is in your control is being here, is
mm.
sustainability. And so I think that once I kind of understood that that was one of the variables in the formula was being here in 10 years.
Mm,
I had to be honest with myself and realize that I wasn't going to be here if I couldn't write my passion, if I couldn't follow
absolutely.
my creativity where it wanted to go. And so that already solves one half of sort of the marketing equation for me because it's like, all right, well, I'm already stuck having to market these things that are probably not the best business decision to write right now, but here's where I'm at. And so everything
Mm.
else is sort of solving for why.
I absolutely love that you said that because I think so many people end up in a self-shaming cycle because they can't reach those accolades right out the gate. Like because I think that that seems to be like what we should aspire to as writers, the high name accolades like that, when really it is that sustainability aspect that because you're right, that is within your control.
Yes. Yes. And I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, truly the only thing under your control is the book you write and how much investment you have in it as you're writing it and what it does for you while you're writing it. Everything else after publication is kind of out of your hands. And I don't say that to flout marketing experts who will say, no, you do have control, because it's true that you should never just give up on a book, that there are always levers you can pull,
Mm,
but there's no promise at the end of that.
mm,
You didn't sign a contract that said if you send 10 newsletters in a month that you're going to sell 100 copies. Like,
yes.
that wasn't disclosed to you when you started writing this book. And so with that said, there being no guarantee, the only thing you have at the end of the day is the work. And
Mm,
I just think that if you start diminishing that investment
mm,
in order to sort of follow these metrics that other people have decided will facilitate, reaching these benchmarks like the New York Times bestseller list. And then you don't reach the New York Times bestseller list, like what then? Now you have a book
mhm,
that was probably unpleasant to write or difficult or
mhm.
tepid. Life's too short to write a tepid book. You know what I mean? Like
Oh,
I
yeah,
think that you should follow your passion. And again, this is not to diminish people who really who are driven by those bookmarks or benchmarks, because I have met authors who they're high in competition. I don't know if you've ever done like Clifton Strengths Finder, but they're yeah, they're very high in competition, and that is a real drive. So I don't want to diminish that need for them. But I
sure.
think the problem comes is when other people who are high in competition, high in achiever, those kinds of strengths, sort of set that expectation for the people who are not that way.
Absolutely. I mean, what you're talking about here is finding what fulfills you in the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
If it is that competition aspect, go for it. If it
Yeah.
is that aspirational achievement process, go for it. If it's just enjoying what you're writing, that's your own benchmark at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
have to define what success and fulfillment looks like for you.
Absolutely. And I think that the way that I think about this in regards to marketing my book is sort of the gift of capitalism to publishing is this idea that book after book, your readership should grow,
Mm,
and growth looks like more numbers.
mm,
So a successful release looks like as many units as I sold last time plus one. And this is like that growth model is insatiable, right? And
yeah.
it creates this feeling that if you're not seeing growth from book to book, that maybe what you need to do is you need to start widening your doorway. You need to start
Mm,
widening your destination in order to get more readers in, because maybe the reason you're not getting more readers is because what you're writing is too niche, it's too specific, it's too whatever. And I actually think this is a foundation of sand to build your house on, because I think that what we should be seeking for sustainability, but also for a successful career, like I don't think I genuinely, this has been how I have found success in my career, is to make my destination deeper
mm,
rather than wider. And so thinking of marketing as not a way to find more readers, but to find my readers.
mm.
I don't want people just to buy one book. I want people to read my book and be like, yeah, this shit, and then go back. Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said
We could curse on this podcast. It's okay.
that. I'm sorry. I swear like a pirate. I am awful about it.
We accept all curse words on this podcast.
And I want people to find my books, read one, and then go back and read my entire backlist. And I think that happens when you are judicious about trying to find the right readers, when you accept the premise that you're not going to be for everyone, and actually that's good. And therefore, I want my marketing and my advertising to be constructed in such a way that people self-select out before they even start.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I talk about that all the time. Is like you can't sell to everyone.
No, and you wouldn't want to, because if you're trying to sell to everyone and your book is specific, you're going to have a lot of disappointed people who are going to feel misled by maybe the blurb or the cover that you designed to be very accessible, or you're going to make your work less specific. And what's going to happen is you're going to end up having a forgettable book. And it doesn't matter if you sell 10,000 copies of a forgettable book one year, and then you're never able to build an audience that will follow you through. I think it's better to have a book that people are still recommending in 7 years because it radicalized them so completely. I think that creates more stability long term.
You're basically leaving your audience breadcrumb trails so that they can be like, yes, I want to continue down this breadcrumb trail, or I'm going to self-select out. Thanks.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
once they get to the end of that trail, then your work is easier.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's so it's just better business to convert the right people to your books and then retain them, you know? And I think that so like a lot of my marketing focuses on okay, you've already decided you want to be part of the Sierra expanded, cinematic universe or whatever. How do I sort of rope you in gently, not like the child catcher from Shay Shitty Bang Bang, but like a
Yeah,
net.
absolutely.
With social media profiles are a really obvious one, but I really like newsletters. And that way I can make sure that if I already know that you liked depraved romance, I can tell you about every depraved romance I'm releasing.
Yeah, yeah. So before we get into particulars, I kind of want to back up a bit and talk about what led you to writing as a career and what past experiences have led to you coming up with these lessons along the way. Like, did you already have this mind for it, or is that something you developed along the way?
That's a good question. So first of all, I will say I'm not someone who always knew she wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a nun at first.
That
And
makes sense.
yeah, I've kind of both gone on the opposite direction and sort of weirdly found myself back in this.
I now see the threads.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I've found myself back into a place where people talk to me a lot about religion. And but as I got older, I then was a student journalist. I wanted to be a journalist for a while until I found out how much money they made. Not a whole lot.
Very true.
And then I did go to school for creative writing, but I always tell authors or aspiring authors, please only do that if you really feel like you're not going to be able to hack any other degree. I knew that if I got a degree in education or business, I would drop out of college. So I had to major in a hobby, basically.
I feel that. I feel
Yeah,
that.
that was the only way I was going to get it through. But I would not say that my creative writing classes, there were like two teachers I had that were really formative and impactful. But on the whole, I would not say it's necessary to become a good writer to take creative writing classes. But I will say that I think the thing that led the most to my thinking as a marketer is I worked at a library for several years. And
Our safe
yeah,
place.
a safe place. Yeah, libraries are awesome. Save the libraries. And I worked behind the desk. Like behind the reference desk, and so I'm kind of like the poor man's librarian. I didn't have an MLS. I just had a bachelor's. But on nights and weekends, that's who they pay to do the reference work. And a big part of that job at like a public library is readers advisory. And readers advisory is when someone shuffles in and they say, I only read murder mysteries and I've read every James Patterson and Louise Penny that's on the shelf. Can you help me find my next murder mystery? And so your job at doing readers advisory is to interrogate gently
Mm,
what they like about those books. Do they like a series where it has a character that is solving a different mystery in each, book, or do they like more the Tana French style where every book is kind of a different character solving a
yeah.
different mystery? To find out what it is that is really drawing them to this book. And a great way you can do it is asking them like their last favorite book they read,
Mm,
and what they loved about it. And so that process of sort of diagnosing what draws people to books and also experiencing the very wide range of what draws people to books, I
yeah.
think was really helpful in helping me orient myself around how to talk about books to readers.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that that is probably the most formative job I had leading up to this.
Yeah, that's so important because I think a lot of writers go out into the world without knowing how readers think
Yeah.
or what readers want.
Well, and I think it's very easy, especially like coming from, 4 years of creative writing workshops with all
Mm.
of these people who wear skinny jeans and carry their tea in a mason jar, that group of people.
Yeah.
And then working in a public library with normal people who have to worry about, bills and kids, and they just want to read something before they go to bed every night.
Yeah.
Um, really helped me understand that authors fall into a trap of
Mm.
talking about their book like they talk about it to other authors.
Absolutely. Yes.
And there is a very big difference. And I can understand the struggle to find the distinction, because I do think that social media has made us more accepting of sort of what I call kitchen table talk, which is
Mm.
like real conversations about how writing is going, what I'm working on, those kinds of
Mm.
updates. And so sometimes the distinction between that informality or that immediacy can sometimes feel like water cooler talk,
Yeah.
but they are different. And so I think that that's really key, because I do see sometimes authors talking about talking about their book like they're in a creative writing workshop, like
Yes.
themes and the motifs and stuff like that. And I'm like, those are the little pearls that they're going to crack open the oyster to get at, right? Like
Hmm.
they're going to find themes of I don't know, like found family in the book.
Sure.
um, but you don't have to go into detail about how you constructed the found family to them, right? Like
Yeah.
they're going to experience it. You don't have to do like a dissertation, like the medium.com article about it for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. And I see so much discourse too in the world of like authors and agents and publishers too, in terms of like a good book that's good mechanically and a good
Hmm.
book that's just a compelling story.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of judgment that happens around.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned the discourse too, and I also think that sometimes it can be very easy to market in discourse talk, and
Totally.
without recognizing that a lot of readers are not in the discourse. And so I
Hmm.
don't, when I say that, I don't mean like, gosh, like a couple years ago, right? Like Grumpy Sunshine became a trope that everyone knew about,
Oh
right? And
man,
so I
yeah.
don't mean like using fan language that is part of the, that comes up in the discourse, but I mainly just mean like, um, I am I'm sick of 3-act breakups, and so I wrote a
Yes.
book that doesn't have a third act breakup. Like that's the kind of thing that you might want to tell a reader, because there are readers who are looking for books that don't have
Hmm.
that. But the way you say those words are going to look different to writers as they are going to look to the readers.
Hmm. Hmm. One of my favorite examples of that is the Goodreads list that lists all of the books that say he, she, they let out a breath they didn't know they were holding. There's an entire Goodreads list dedicated to listing the books that use that phrase
Oh my God, that's amazing.
so
Also,
that people can avoid them.
yeah, also it's me. At like 5 times an hour, I'm like, I have to breathe.
Yeah, yeah. I was just like that. I mean, that would be a niche reader community, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Hmm. So, how has this process gone for you so far? What have you been able to achieve? What is the goal that you're beyond sustainability that you're aiming towards?
So I think um, all of my books, even though they are just like depraved little romances, so I don't want to talk about them like,
I mean,
they're
finding the pre-series was a canon event for me, honestly.
well, I don't want to talk about them like, like I'm writing like deep lit fic or something. But I think that all of my books, they start out as me having a question. And so I'm not really
Mm,
writing to an answer, which a lot of authors do. A lot of authors are like, I need to say this. And then they
mm,
and then they start writing. I wish I had that kind of clarity and certainty in my life. Most books start out with a question, which is, what does it mean to live a holy life? Or what does it mean to be humble when you've
mm.
never had the circumstance that forced you to be humble? Like these kinds of questions, and I don't know the answer until I finish until 100,000
Yeah,
words later.
yeah.
But what that means is that I have to approach things like Facebook ads, like newsletter copy, like Instagram copy, a little bit differently because I am essentially marketing a book that's experiential. And
Mm,
so these are books where they're kind of hard to collapse sometimes into an elevator
yeah.
pitch. They kind of like, which is not great. I don't suggest if you can write a book that you can collapse into an elevator pitch, please do. Like that's just the best way to do it. But it means that when I am marketing, I have really had to sort of embrace that what I am marketing is the reading experience,
Mm.
um more so than being able to be like, well, this is I don't know, this is Gossip Girl meets the reality show Alone.
Oh, comp
It's
titles.
like
Oh,
and again, if you can do that, please do. Your life will be so much easier. One of my friends who's a romance author, Sky Warren, she does a lot of work with authors about advertising and marketing. And one of the things she says repeatedly is that advertising is storytelling. And
yeah.
this is one of the reasons why she says, it's really difficult to outsource things like Facebook ads
Mm,
because no one is going to know your work as well as you do.
yeah.
And so you're basically, outsourcing someone to do storytelling about your storytelling. And
Especially if they don't even read your book to begin with.
yeah, and if they haven't read your book, and if they're not familiar with the genre, I just think that it's very difficult to outsource. And so I have really embraced that the way I message my books is another form of storytelling. And
Mm,
what I am trying to tell the reader is a story about how they're going to feel if they read this
mm.
book. And I try to do it in such a way that readers who are like, no, I don't want angst. I don't want forbidden. I don't want, some people write a third act breakup. I say I write all act breakups because I mean, these people are just cutting off pieces of themselves the whole book. Um, and but I try to message it in such a way that feeling is there, right? So that the
Mm,
people who are like, yes, that's what I
hmm.
want. Like, tear me apart, Reverend Sierra, and they're all in.
Let me open my chest. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And so really that's my approach to marketing, is that it is storytelling, and I'm trying to sort of tell a story about how this book is going to make you feel. And I would say that I think it's working pretty well. Like, I mean, I am still learning a lot 10 years into this game. Like, there's always more to learn. But what I have found is you want to embrace word of mouth marketing because it is the most powerful
Absolutely.
marketing you will ever have. It's more power, you can spend millions on Facebook ads and never achieve what one viral TikTok achieves. I've
Yeah.
seen books being picked up by publishers because of one TikTok. Like,
Yeah.
that's powerful. That's the power of word of mouth. And so whatever you can do to facilitate word of mouth usually tends to be the most successful. So this can look like influencer outreach. This can look like special packaging for books. That's really popular right now,
Yeah, it is.
like arcs with stained pages or
Yeah.
whatever.
All the
But
PR
that
box.
all the PR box, or it can just look like making a Facebook group for readers to talk to each other.
Yeah.
It can mean that when you are pulling together things for emailing fellow authors to see if they'll do a newsletter swap for you. That you are creating an easy list of tropes, an easy list of sexy teasers, things that will really magnetize people to be like, oh, I need to read that and I need to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So facilitating word of mouth is usually like my first line of defense. And I think it's
Absolutely.
worked out really well. In fact, I would say that above all, my career has been because of readers, talking to other readers about my book. It's not been because I took $1,000 marketing class and,
Yeah.
or spent, $200,000 a year on Facebook ads. Like it
Yeah.
was readers who shared the book.
Yeah. Have you ever galvanized book clubs? Do you have any relationship with book clubs?
I don't have like ongoing relationships, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
do think that my approach to book clubs is always yes. And so as much as I can, when someone asks, can you do a virtual book club visit? I always say yes. Um,
Mm.
and I think it was last year, 2 years ago, when Julie and I released our first Christmas book, we actually
Mm.
did a virtual book club sign up. So we
Mm.
set up a Calendly, and if you read our book for your holiday, your December, November book club pick, we would come in and do like a 20-minute Zoom with your book club. And we did like 40 of
Wow.
those. So it was fantastic because it was really a chance to again facilitate that word of mouth because you have this group of 10 to 15 people who've read your book, they're excited to talk to you, and
Yeah.
when you answer your questions, when you give them all those fun Easter eggs, it then means if they share that book with their friends, they're able to do it with all these extra little things. Like, did you know Julie and Sierra came up with this book when they were eating a flight of pie, like 5 different pies that they had all put on one plate, and they're able to use those little inside details to kind of pitch the book to their friends.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I will say, going back to working at the library, the number one indicator of whether or not a patron would take a book home that I recommended or helped them find was if I personally had read it. So,
Mm.
because there were a lot of books that you can't read every book that I would be like,
Yeah,
well, a lot
there's
of people
too many.
love Candace Millard. If you like, narrative nonfiction, you should try her. I haven't read her yet. But if I was like, oh, you've got to read Sarah Bull's Unfamiliar Fishes, is so funny. And, you learn all this, interesting history about Hawaii, and the audiobook has Keanu Reeves, so when you have experienced it yourself, I mean, it's like gospel, right? Like you
Yeah.
really are sharing your excitement for something and people feel that they resonate with it. And so that I think is something I always try to keep in mind too, is like that word of mouth is it's just
Mm-hmm.
gold.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, what's number two?
Number two, sorry, of what?
Number two under word of mouth.
So I think that I think oh, this is hard. I I really think that one of the things that I'm always conscientious of is that we don't always know the story that we're really looking for. And
Mm.
we are usually looking for something that sounds great, you know?
Mm.
And so I don't think a lot of people, I mean, I have met some of them at the library. Some people are like, I'm looking for the next canon event book, right? Like, I'm looking for the book that is going to make me really reflect on my terrible relationship with my mother.
Mm.
Not me personally. She's dead, and
Yeah.
our
Yep.
relationship's great. but
For example.
but like people aren't typically looking for something that's going to make them do self interrogation in
Mm.
fiction. They're
Yeah.
that's
Very
something that you
true.
seek out in nonfiction typically. But usually, if people are looking for fiction, they're looking for their next great thing. And so I do try when I am talking about my book to really highlight the story that they want, which is you want cozy small town that's also inclusive and full of lube. Like, here you go. And then, inside of that, you might find feelings about being plus size. You might find conversations about sex work. You might find conversations about having a mother with bipolar disorder. But that's not usually what I lead with, right?
Mhm.
Because I think that those are things that matter, like that readers are going to experience and discover in context. And
Mhm.
so kind of stripping some of those things out of context almost makes it feel like homework, you know, like,
It's medicinal, right?
yeah, like I'm gonna read this book and it's gonna be good for you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like I'd rather take the Mary Poppins approach with like
ab-
hiding the medicine in a bunch of sugar.
absolutely, absolutely. Hide the vegetables in the pasta sauce or whatever. And so I do like, I don't talk about this a lot because I don't want to make it sound like I don't think that these conversations are valuable in science
Oh,
fiction,
sure. Yeah.
and that I don't support there being a larger discourse about what genre fiction is doing
Mm,
around these themes, because I absolutely think that conversation should be there and I think it's vital.
mm,
And I do think that genres are doing work. But I do think that those conversations typically are conversations that happen among readers or among authors or in review sections. But I
hmm.
don't know that those conversations need to happen in the caption of a Facebook ad. You know,
Yes.
um, I don't know that they're always the best Instagram content. I think newsletters are a space where you can sort of unpack that a little bit,
Hmm.
but that's because you have room in a newsletter. You have quite a bit of room. And so, really recognizing your various vectors of communicating about your book and that they
Mm,
do different things, right? Like
mm.
your newsletter is first of all, a different kind of reader is going to open up a Instagram newsletter
Yes.
than is going to be clicking on an ad.
Yeah.
And so, just recognizing that there's different spaces for different kinds of conversation around your work.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to what you said earlier in terms of the depth versus breadth thing is you go into to have these conversations about these stickier subjects, you have to have that depth context along with it
Yeah.
because you can't deal with those subjects surface level.
Absolutely. I could not have said it better myself. Like, I really don't think a Facebook ad copy is going to give any kind of emotional nuance to
No.
something like a complicated relationship with your dad, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so when you're like, my book, it's about having a complicated relationship with your dad
Yeah.
and like a horrible cat, you know, like there's not a whole lot of room for the reader to sort of feel like, okay, so how am I supposed to feel when I read this book? Is it going to be like
Yeah.
90%
Yeah.
horrible cat and then like 10% dad? Like, what is it going to be about? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I really think that you're absolutely right. And so recognizing that, you know, the reason that it takes us 100,000 words to write a book about what it means for a queer person to find a found family
Mm-hmm.
is because that experience cannot necessarily be condensed into
Mm-hmm.
a bullet point on a trope graphic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you
Yeah.
still can't do found family, and a lot of people are going to really respond to it. But I think just recognizing that there's different vectors that you're going to give that to
Yeah.
readers.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the breadcrumb analogy earlier, like you don't want to hand someone a boulder as the breadcrumb to start
Yeah, yeah.
with.
Well, and I think especially when it's kind of a heavy boulder, right? Like
Yeah.
my book Saint is, you know, it's a book about someone who's experienced depression, and
Hmm.
it takes place 5 years after sort of a crisis point, and he's doing
Hmm.
a lot better now. But like that's a big part of the story. But when I talk about it, I emphasize the doing better now, right? Like this is a story about someone he's learned to live with depression and now he's learning to thrive with depression. Like this is about lavender and beer and
Yeah.
sex with a journalist
Yeah.
and also this thing, but I don't like really go in and I'm like, well, let's, you know,
Hmm.
did you want to read about depression, kids? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
I got the book for you.
Yeah. I honestly read Sinner first because I didn't think I had a priest kink. And then I read Sinner and I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Do
I'm
I?
questioning a million things. And like you really did open my eyes in the sense of like, oh my God, I'm thinking about all of these deeper topics in the middle of a smut book. I was like, how is this happening right now? I was like, I'm thinking about God, I'm thinking about death, I'm thinking about mental health, like all of this stuff within smut. And I'm like, it literally is sugar and medicine mixed together. And it was just mind blowing.
Yeah, well, and I truly feel like all of these deeper themes are experienced through the lens of the character. And so if you don't know the character yet, it's really hard
Yeah.
to talk about it. And
Yeah.
so But again, I would say this is really only for me talking about it from like an advertising point of view. So
Absolutely.
I'm definitely not saying that like when you're talking to other authors about it, when you're on threads or, you know, when reviewers are doing a YouTube video about it, like that they
Mm,
shouldn't unpack all of this because I do think
mm,
that's the forum for it. But I do think that when you're thinking purely about here's how I'm a person who's never met me before, never experienced my
yeah.
books, how am I going to sort of lure them in
Yeah.
and be like,
Yeah. You
gotcha.
cannot start with capital T trauma.
No, not with the mom is dying of cancer.
Yeah. 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 Because I think at that point it becomes more trauma dumping than trauma resolving, hopefully, in some shape or
Yeah.
form.
Well, and I am my own marketing avatar, which is probably not a good idea, but I also have to be tricked into feeling my feelings. And
Mm,
so, which is why I love romance because it does it really well. And
yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's my approach is that I'm not demanding that you hand over your emotional energy to me as part of this transaction. Because if an author demanded that of me, I'd probably be like, no. That's why I don't read a lot of lit fic because they're always like, here's 400 pages
Yeah.
about a boy who lost his dog. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, no thanks, because,
Yeah.
you know, I don't think so. But if they were like, you know, he's going on an adventure to fight monsters in his neighborhood, then I'm like
Mhm.
all in. And then when the dog dies, I'm like,
Yeah,
ah.
yeah. And I think you're right in terms of like this vector conversation. You have to be aware of what these different, the ecosystem of these different platforms as well. Because most people scroll through Facebook, scroll through Instagram as just like a middle of the day random activity. And so they're not looking to get shocked by capital T trauma in the middle of their lunch break, right? Unless
Yeah,
they're actively going out and searching for that thing. They're
yeah.
just scrolling through the news, and then all of a sudden it's like a punch in the face, and they're like, I cannot go back to work after this. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Well, I think that I want people to feel like the experience of reading my books is something that I'm giving them, like that
Mm,
they're going to get something, not that I'm going to take
mm.
something. And that's hard to like sort of map out when it's something as amorphous as energy, but
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I definitely feel it when a book is like I'm going to take your energy.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I think that that's something I'm often very very aware of. And again, like I want to sort of put, you know, like fences around this. I do not mean that any reference to any sort of
yeah,
theme like
absolutely.
found family, I keep using that as an example, is that, you know,
Yeah,
but I just think that the way that you frame it, like whether
yeah,
you frame it positive, like you would frame found family as a positive, not framing the need for it that led the protagonist to find the family,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
I think it's all in
exactly.
how you frame these things.
Yeah, like for example, I've used the phrase in some of my book blurbs, like a struggling hero on a redemption arc.
Yeah.
That's so much lighter than saying like he's going through depression and he's going through anxiety and he's fighting his demons and you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, because it's like it's that sort of upward feeling, right? And then
Yes.
that upward feeling feels like a gift. Like, all right, I get to receive this upward feeling. And then
Hmm.
they get in and they get invested and you know, and that's when they have the context of like, okay, I can go on a journey with
Yeah.
someone because now I know him. So I'm
Yeah.
willing to go on this journey with him. But before when it was just a Facebook ad and they didn't know the character, like it's understandable that they might be like, well, I don't want to go on that a
Yeah.
hard journey. I'm on a hard journey of my own right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, I'll leave that book over here. Thanks.
Yeah.
Until I have the emotional capacity, which maybe never.
Which maybe never. I mean, but sometimes, you know, like there are books that I've been like, not now, and then I'll circle back a couple years later, and then I'm like, this was the right time, you know,
Yeah.
and I love it.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you had to wrap all of this up, what lessons have you learned that would be helpful to our audiences?
So I think the first thing I would say is that when you're marketing, so much of the sort of out there advice that's circulating is to find your comps, to identify where you fit in the ecosystem, right? And sort of target those readers, target those kinds of covers, you know, write a similar kind of blurb. And all of that has value. So I don't want to like sound like I'm writing that off. I think that I think that's 50% of it. and of making a brand.
Absolutely.
And then I think the other 50% is deciding how you are not like the other books in your
Yes.
subgenre. Um,
Yes.
because you want to give the reader a sense that you're the same but different, that you
Hmm.
are something that they already love, but with like one degree of difference, so that there is, it's not just going to be more of the same, that there is a reason that they buy your book and they want to start reading it right away.
Hmm.
And I think that this is kind of an often overlooked thing. I was just listening to an old episode of a podcast called Gold Digger,
Mm.
and it's like the second episode, and the host is interviewing a website designer who designs websites for wedding photographers. And
Mm.
so she was saying over the course of her career, she's been around long enough that she has repeat customers. And so she said what happens is people come in and the first website they design, they ask for basically the same website across the board. Everyone
Yeah.
wants a wedding photography website that looks like every other wedding photography website because they want people to click on it and be like, all right, like,
Yeah.
this is definitely a wedding photographer and they're doing the same kind of pictures that I see on Instagram, and that's exactly what I want. And then she said that what happens is the photographers who are still in business after like 5 years come back to her and they want a new website. And what they want is something that is not like other
Mm.
websites. They want something that reflects who they are. So she talks about there's a wedding photographer, like they're a couple, and they
Mm.
do black and white pictures, like very moody, sort of like foggy,
Yeah.
dark wedding pictures
Dark
in black.
academia weddings.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And so they, instead of having the light bright photography website that has that whatever that cursive font is that we
Yeah.
can't get away from,
Yeah.
uh they have this very dark, crisp like website that looks, I mean, you wouldn't look at it immediately and be like weddings, but once you see their pictures you're like, oh, I know exactly what their lens is. I know what their aesthetic is. I know what kind of pictures they're going to take for me. And
Mm.
either customers are going to be like, no, I don't want that.
Mm.
Or they're going to be like, hell yeah, how can this is exactly what I want. And so I think that, what I really took away from that was that identifying what makes you different from the other people in your field is so vital to
Hmm.
finding the right people for you.
Hmm.
And that is the second most important thing, really, is focusing on finding your readers, not more readers.
Yes.
That deeper, not wider. You want people who are going to read one of your books and then read all of your backlist because they just love the way that you construct stories, or they love your storytelling voice, or whatever it is that they resonate. And I think that those sort of two approaches, right? Like focusing on having growing my roots into who I am, that year after year I should become more of who I am,
Yeah.
really helps me center my marketing around that brand, right?
Yeah.
I'm very lucky, even though I have written all over the place in all these different genres, that I've been writing long enough that I can see across historical and contemporary and taboo, like, okay, there's these threads that I can see in
Hmm.
every Sierra book. And so I can kind of tailor my marketing around that. But really what I
Hmm.
focus on is making sure that the people it's not for can recognize it right away. So, in my welcome newsletter, I say like, this is for people who like depraved romance. If you like wicked things, this might be for you. So that people can be like, oh, depraved, wicked, like that. Those are words that I only want to read about cinnamon rolls who are professional dog walkers. I don't want to read any of this forbidden nonsense. In my ads, making sure that there's not sort of a like, I wouldn't pitch Priest as like only a small town romance, right? Like
No, absolutely not.
and because I want to be specific. And I think that feels limiting for some people, especially if you're just starting out and you're just trying to build your audience. Specificity feels like constraints.
Yeah, because
But
it might
I'm
just be two people to start out with.
right. It might just be two. But they might be super spreaders and they might lead
Mhm.
to four, and then they might be super spreaders. And you have this like great curve of exponential word of mouth. And I just think that we have to reframe things like specificity being a constraint is that constraint actually being freeing. Because
Yeah.
once you realize you don't have to market to every reader out there, you are free to take risks in your marketing. You are
Yes.
free to try out things in your ads that you might be nervous to try otherwise, because you already know that you don't want cinnamon roll dog walker. And
Yeah.
so that means that you can just lean into being more of yourself.
Yeah.
And I also think that it's just smart business at the end of the day, because people will see, if I'm using small town romance as an example, like people might see 10 ads for small town romance,
Mm.
but they're only going to see probably one with a priest. And so, being honest and specific to who you are creates novelty in marketing, in advertising, and that makes readers stop, like that makes them pause and read the whole caption and maybe even click through, and that's what you want.
And I think it also makes your job easier and healthier.
Oh, yes. I mean, absolutely. Here's the thing about sustainability is that if you build a brand that is not authentic to who you are, you're going to burn out so fast, because you
Yeah.
are essentially doing the creative work of writing your things and then a second creative job, which is constructing a
Of
persona.
acting in like
Yeah.
10 different personas.
Yeah, and so I think that all brands should be authentically rooted in your writing, and your writing should be authentically rooted in who you are. And so you'll
Mhm.
have, oh, this is like a corporate term, but you'll have some vertical integration there, right? Where ultimately the soil for your marketing, for your advertising is yourself, is
Mhm.
the kind of person that you are. And that just makes it so much easier. That way I don't have to sit down and I don't have to think like someone who, votes differently than me, who reads books that, are providing them a certain kind of safety. Like, I don't have to do any of that. I can sit down and I can think like, okay, like, what do weird people like me like to read? And I just have a much easier time, I think, coming up with copy, because this is like a little bit more shop talky, but really so much of marketing and advertising is iteration,
Yeah.
and just iterating and iterating and iterating and seeing what works and seeing what lands, taking risks, seeing what works, and so I think that it's so hard to find a fund of energy to do that constant iteration
Mhm.
if you're pulling it from some imaginary version of yourself.
I had to
That
start thinking about it as a mad scientist approach
Yes, yeah, yeah.
of
I
like, let's
actually,
pull this lever, see what happens. Okay, I
yeah.
blew up my workshop. Whoops.
Whoops. I know. Writing for me, I always say like I'm in the R&D lab, like
Yeah.
just like smashing beakers and who knows what's going to happen next.
I love that. I love that because it is just so much like I think about this a lot in terms of virality and internet fame is that it's A, unsustainable, and B, very damaging for mental health.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people who aspire to that realize that that's what they're signing up for.
Well, I think it's really hard to manufacture virality. It's
Mm,
really hard to force it.
mm,
Uh, and when you do try, most of the time it doesn't work.
mm.
And then when it does work, you are in a situation where you have to replicate something that wasn't honest to begin with.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just easier to write the thing that is as weird or as taboo or as provocative or as, wrenchingly emotional, whatever it is, lean into that need you have to write, even if it is about cinnamon roll dog walkers. You
Sure.
lean, yeah, you lean into that. And if it generates virality, great. But if it doesn't, you still have something that is deeply specific and deeply word of mouth. And it might generate virality later. So like Priest went viral on TikTok in like 2021, 2022, like around that
Mm,
time.
yeah.
It came out in 2015. Like it was
Oh,
and
wow.
people were like talking about in 2021 it would have been a 6-year-old book.
Wow.
And so it had sold well when it came out.
Oh,
It's one of my bestsellers, but like it hadn't been my number one bestseller. That was American Queen. Like that had sold more
oh
copies.
yeah.
And but it was doing well, but it was also like, just kind of it had found its people and just kind of hanging out there. But then on Book Talk, the 6 or 7-year-old book, just it goes viral. There's no way I could have predicted that. There's no way I could have
Mm.
written Priest knowing that in 6 years there's going to be an app where it starts as a lip syncing app and then it does something different. I couldn't have ever
Yeah.
predicted that. The only thing I could do was write the book that I needed to write,
Yeah.
that felt the most compelling to me, and be indulgent in it as well and not try to make it softer and more accessible. And that's
Mm.
what I did. And then lo and behold, years later, it found a real big place. And so I just think that it's really hard to sort of try to hit that moving target, because you never know, what book of yours is going to blow up in your backlist and, be the thing that sets you free.
100%. Let your freak flag fly.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, anything else you want to add before we start wrapping up?
Yes, my number one advice to all authors is you can always change your name and start over. So
Yes.
I did it, so I'm proof that you can do it. There's no like series of, diminished sales. There's no failure, there's no rejection that has to be the end of you writing. You are always the engine of your own career, and so you can always start a new name and try again.
I love that. Yeah, because author names, like people always joke that I had an automatic author name. So if I change again, I'll have to find something else.
Well, you can do what I did, because really I had another career when I started doing Sierra Simone. And I just did like a kind of a stripper name, thing where I grew up on a
Yeah,
street called Sierra Circle, and then Simone was my middle name. And then Sierra Simone, I
excellent.
thought about it for about 3 minutes. And so if I'd have known that Sierra Simone was going to become my job, I probably would have thought about it a little bit harder. But no,
That's
here
how
we
it
are.
happens, though. You can't
Yeah.
plan for virality, even with your own
No. No.
name. All right. Well, this is powerful stuff that we're talking about. And audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts, feelings, stories, insights with us. We'd love to know how marketing journeys like these have impacted you in your own writing careers. And please let us know if you have any questions about anything we talked about. We'd be happy to answer them. If there's any lingo that you're like, wait, what does that mean? Reach out to us. If you want any specifics, we're always here for you. And special thanks to Sierra. It's been
Thanks for having
great.
me. Thank you.
Yeah, so please comment, like, subscribe, check out Linktree/Claire Joins for all of my links. And then where can folks find out more about you?
So I'm not online a whole lot. I have people who help me with online stuff. So I do have an Instagram that I'm on sometimes, and sometimes it's my assistant. It's the Sierra Simone. I also have a Facebook group, Sierra Simone's Lambs, for my readers. And I highly encourage you to sign up for my newsletter. That is where it's always me 100% of the time. It's
Mm,
fair trade, organic Sierra. You can sign up for that on my website.
love it. And I'll make sure the links are available for easy access. And until next time, please remember that you all have extraordinary stories to share, and we're rooting for you as you use them to change the world for the better. Take care, guys.
Thank you.